what if the United States decided to draw a completely new line in the sand for the entire Western Hemisphere? Today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating strategic text called the Donroe Doctrine. It outlines a pretty bold, and you could say controversial vision for America's role in its own neighborhood.
So, what is this doctrine all about, really? Well, the text itself kicks things off with a huge question. Is it time for a totally new U.S. policy for the Americas? Let's break down the answer it gives us.
At its core, what it really boils down to is this. The Donroe Doctrine is a blueprint for pushing back. The text basically argues that to secure its own interests, the United States has to actively work to remove its main adversaries, we're talking China and Russia, from the Western Hemisphere and, reestablish itself as the top dog in the region.
But why now? What's the big rush? To really get the proposed solution, you first have to understand the problem as the doctrine sees it. And the whole strategy is built on this one central idea, that America's quote-unquote backyard is under serious threat.
And this phrase, right from the source text, it tells you everything you need to know. Reclaim our backyard. That kind of language, it completely changes the picture. It's not a collection of different sovereign countries anymore. It's a single sphere of American influence, one that the doctrine argues has been lost and, well, needs to be taken back.
So what does this so-called threat actually look like? According to the source, we're not talking about a single military danger. It's a challenge on multiple fronts. You've got China making economic inroads with all its investments, and at the same time, Russia is making political moves. The idea is that all of this is coming together to slowly chip away at U.S. leadership.
And the doctrine is super clear about who the adversaries are. This isn't some vague, shadowy threat. It's pointing the finger directly at the specific and growing influence of two global powers, China and Russia. So let's see how the text breaks down their different playbooks.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the source lays out two very different approaches. China is portrayed as the patient, long-term player, using big investments and infrastructure deals to slowly build up influence. Russia, on the other hand, is described as more of a political and military disruptor, someone who's looking for chances to challenge U.S. power more directly whenever an opportunity pops up.
Okay, so the doctrine has laid out the problem and pointed to the main players. Now for the big question. What's the plan? What does it actually propose to do about it? Well, the response is a very deliberate, three-pronged strategy that's designed to counter both of these threats at the same time. And right here, this is the heart of the strategy. First, on the money side of things, the plan is to compete directly with China by offering U.S.-backed alternatives for things like infrastructure and investment. Second, diplomatically, the goal is to build up coalitions of countries to sort of box in Russia's political allies. And third, on the security front, it's calling for much deeper military and intelligence partnerships all across the hemisphere.
So what's the end goal of all this? How is this whole strategy justified in the text? According to the source, this is about more than just a simple power play. It's actually framed with a very specific, almost moral purpose in mind.
This quote right here, it's pretty much the philosophical core of the entire doctrine. It frames this whole strategic shift not just as a power grab, but as a kind of moral duty. The U.S. has to be, in the text's own words, a force of good and order. And that suggests that without its leadership, the hemisphere could fall into chaos, or worse, fall under the influence of some not-so-benevolent powers.
And this is the endgame. This is the vision the Donroe Doctrine is trying to create. A protected hemisphere, shielded from outside influence, where U.S.-led stability and economic prosperity can really take root and grow. That's the ultimate goal. Which leaves us with a final and pretty provocative question that the text itself really makes you think about. What are the full implications for the U.S., for all of its neighbors, and really for the entire world when a superpower decides it's time to completely redefine its own neighborhood?